We're ready. Okay. Just going to wait for a few more people to join, but thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's joining us this afternoon for the TechFest and Sparkle webinar, Simplifying the Digital Noise, Cutting Through Clutter. In terms of housekeeping and agenda, we're hoping to get some really interesting discussion from our amazing panel that I'll let Uzoma introduce. But yeah, it'll be about 30 minutes of discussion and then plenty of time for Q&A afterwards, about 30 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions you'd like to add, please add them in the Q&A section and we'll get to them at the end. In terms of housekeeping, please make sure that you keep everything muted so there's no background noise. And yeah, please follow us as well on Twitter. It's @SparklePlaceNG. And yeah, thank you very much to all of our panelists joining. And yes, handing over to Uzoma Dozie now, who is Chief Sparkler.
Well, thank you everyone for signing up for what should be an interesting, quick 60 minutes of insights from our wonderful panelists and questions from the audience. So this is not a discussion about fintech or lectures on the theories of what digital can do for you. It will just be a discussion from ordinary people who are doing exciting stuff in their chosen areas of business. And we're lucky to have people who are actually in the type of businesses that you need to live in any society. So we have people in food and entertainment. We have, of course, health, education, payments, because you have to pay for stuff, and then they have to be delivered to you in this time. Now, the common thread here is that they are all leveraging on technology to engage their customers and to ensure their operations are efficient. Some of them, including me, have started this journey before, and some who thought about it have now accelerated that idea because now customers want you to deliver to them and not them look for you. So now systems have to change. Since COVID, I'm not going to talk about COVID because I think we're all COVID out from information. If you need more information about COVID, BBC and CNN and the likes have better information than I do, so I won't talk about that. But we've seen people, people have moved from physical to online meetings. We have work from home. We have virtual churches, personal training, school parties, and of course, a massive increase in home delivery. And so I think that whole digital cycle, which is, awareness, awareness, appreciation, adoption, has increased in amplitude and speed. A year ago, if you ask a few people about digital, they say, yeah, I've heard about it, my kids use it, and appreciation was minimal, and adoption was, I'm used to what I'm doing today. I'm used to my old style. Like, I'll think about it. Today it's, awareness is 90%. Appreciation is, oh, really? Could you actually do this? I never knew you could do that. And adoption is an imperative. There's no choice, no choice anymore. So there's no progress without destruction. If you want to make omelets, you have to break eggs. And this COVID pandemic is the biggest disruption that we've seen in our time, and it means that it's room for the biggest opportunities for all. And digital and technology present the obvious, which is high productivity. People are probably working more and have done more meetings online in the last 2 months than they've done in 2 years. Or they are also, of course, costs, less manpower, less resources to actually live. But there's also the ones that we take for granted, the opportunities, which is increased trust, transparency, accountability. Those are the things that are very, very important in terms of getting customers, keeping customers, and actually expanding that. So as people, we're going to need to make some adjustments, and that is at the heart of this webinar. And these adjustments will depend on many factors: your type of business, the type of customers, and even where your location is. And like I said, we're fortunate to have owners, successful entrepreneurs that have been successful in making adjustments and are here to share those experiences and also answer questions to help you simplify that digital clutter, which is coincidentally the title of this. So, I would like to start with a general question to all our panelists to tell us about their business, gaps in the market that they saw that propelled them and to start their business. And they will also introduce themselves so that they introduce themselves, what they're doing, and what propelled them to do this business. So, Sim, I will give you that honor to start and tell us about ULessons, the next successful venture that you're embarking on. Your mic is off, Sim.
Okay, there you go. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so thanks, Uzoma, and thanks, Jessica, and the rest of the team for organizing this. So my name is Sim Shagaya. I'm the CEO of ULesson Education. So ULesson Education really is addressing massive deficits in education on the African continent. It was one of those opportunities that was kind of right there in front of you and didn't seem like a commercial opportunity. But when you start looking at it, I think the only way you can address some of the challenges in education is commercial. We've had over 50 years of sort of structured aid, and we haven't really made a dent in the challenges of education. So, and there are some sort of contextual challenges there. For instance, if you look at Africa, teacher-student ratios on the continent are 1 to 70, some of the worst in the world. Some parts of Nigeria are 1 to 70. There are even some places that teacher-student ratios are 1 to 90. But you can use digital technologies to vastly sort of take great talent and use digital to leverage that talent and apply it to many, many more, a wider audience than you'd otherwise make possible. So practically, what it means is that ULesson sits on 3 pillars: academia. So we have these incredibly talented teachers that are not only sort of subject matter experts in their own right, but they know how to explain things at a distance. And we've combined that with technology. So we deliver this incredible educational content via an app to markets in Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Liberia. This is our first market that we're attacking quite aggressively. It's 260 million people or so. So, you've got the academia, you've got technology, and then we're using media. The process of us creating this content and producing it and broadcasting it is very similar to the way a news a production is done, or the way a movie is scripted and then ultimately produced. Except in this case, we're talking about Newton's laws of motion, beings are naturally sort of visual animals. It's one thing to read about the digestive system or the circulatory system. It's another thing to have a young person travel through the vein or the 4 chambers of the heart and really understand the context and to see an amoeba feeding. It sticks in memory much more. So this is our mission, is to use media, technology, and the best academics we can find to make technology available across the continent affordably.
Thanks, Tim. And that's really really interesting. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions on that, and I'll ask you a few questions in the next session. And so, thank you, Tim. Rennie, if we could have your own story, and if you can keep it as short but impactful as possible, would appreciate that. Your mic is on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Zoma. Thank you, Jessica, for inviting me. This promises to be quite exciting. I'm the founder of Alara. I'm not by Alara. Alara is a contemporary African lifestyle concept, which consists of fashion, art, design, food, and culture. We were created to celebrate and elevate the African lifestyle in a very contemporary setting. We created a bricks and mortar store as well as a physical restaurant as a sort of a good way of showing what the future of Africa could look like. I'm specifically here to talk about NOC, so I will go to NOC because NOC is an extension of the Alara concept, which is to show the world the new African cuisine, taking inspiration from our past, using nostalgia to create a cuisine of the future. In doing that, we were able to take a lot of inspiration from different countries in Africa, and create a space that we felt reflected what the future of Africa could look like. So we have Pan-African cuisine. We've sort of created different combinations from scratch. We also created something that's a little bit of a space that we hope that people can come and be inspired by. So that's it in brief. That's what I do.
Thank you very much, Rennie, and thank you for keeping it brief and specific. Vivian, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi, my name is Vivian Nwaka, and I'm founder of MedZaf. MedZaf is an enterprise solution for healthcare stakeholders to purchase, manage, and track medications. So we use data analytics and technology to increase the access of medications, affordability, as well as the quality of medications that are dispensed. So we launched in January of 2017. We launched to combat the fake and substandard medication issue that is rampant in Africa, but also other emerging markets. Now post-COVID, we're looking at broken supply chains that could potentially make this problem even worse. So our company is even that much more important for the average citizen of a country like Nigeria. We have, in the time of COVID, we've expanded across Nigeria, and we've been able to take advantage of the fact that the traditional competitors and traditional supply chains of medication have been disrupted, and that we're one of the few players that from the very beginning have incorporated and trained our clients to be able to use technology to get what they need. So this has just been a time of expansion for us. We work with over 400 hospitals and pharmacies across Nigeria, all the major manufacturers, insurance companies, and NGOs and other stakeholders. So thank you for having me here today.
And thank you for accepting. So the next one, I think there's a logic to our madness. So we've heard from all the providers of food services, and we have to pay for these things. So Shola, tell us about your business.
Hi everyone. My name is Shola Akinlade, not Akindele. I'm the CEO of Paystack. Paystack, we help merchants accept payments from their customers. We launched about 4 years ago. And the real mission, we launched Paystack because we wanted to accelerate digital payments in Africa. I think Africa is the most underpenetrated payments market in the world. And that is really, really annoying because that's where I'm from. And think about having 1 billion people in the continent. We already know that our fiscal infrastructure is messed up. Obi will tell us more about fiscal infrastructure. And so if there's any continent that really needs like digital infrastructure to work, it should be here, and so that's why we started Paystack. We have about 115 people now. I think we've made a lot of progress. One of my favorite stats to show how much progress we've made is when we launched Paystack in January 2016, Nigeria as a country was doing about $35 million monthly in digital payments online. Today, Paystack is doing 4 times what Nigeria was doing before we launched. So I think we've made a lot of progress. That said, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think personally for me, that's what I'm excited about, just seeing how we can figure out how to accelerate payments and commerce in the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't, later we'll find out how much, how much has changed pre and after COVID, because I see a lot of businesses are going online, but a lot of offline businesses are also struggling as well.
Exactly.
And
we'll talk about it.
Obi, without you can pay for stuff, but stuff needs to be delivered to people. So the logistics business should be actually thriving very soon. So Obi, tell us about yourself and your business and and then thank you.
Thank you, Zoma, for bringing me to this forum here. Thanks, everyone. My name is Obi Ozo. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kobo 360. Kobo 360 is working to revolutionize supply chain across frontier markets. We started from Nigeria in 2018. We are now able to do same in 6 other African countries, and also looking to do that in Middle East. It's quite interesting that most African countries actually rank from 110 to 200 in the World Supply Chain Efficiency Index. So you begin to kind of understand the challenge we face here, but it's not just about ranking, it also contributes to the cost of goods, right? And at the end of the day, most of the organizations pass through that entire supply chain cost to the final consumers, who are basically the lowest class in these countries. And of course, we know, of course, the poverty issues we face here. So our mission is really to use technology to drive efficiency in the supply chain so that we can bring down cost of goods. But also, I believe that Africa is also an interesting place to really innovate within the supply chain. One of the things that is exciting me, which is my crazy idea recently, is really the research into cargo drones. I imagine a future in the next 5 days where we're able to have drones that can move 500 tons of goods and land vertically, right? And also that is fuel efficient. Then you really be able to optimize supply chain across Africa, removing the different transparency issues, the cross-border challenges, right? And this is something that will not only work in Africa, but other emerging markets across the world, right? So I believe that there is something here. It's difficult, but thank God to the team at Kobo. We're making some progress, and we also continue to learn. We are not just here to provide the knowledge, we're also here to reflect and also learn from the audience as well.
Thank you very much, Obi. You know, like for a minute, there was something different about you. And in fact, this is the first time I'm thinking without your red cap. So, I mean, it's a different look. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I think for the next round, I'm going to be asking like specific questions to people, because you're in specific industries, and the whole idea is that all the questions I ask you should come to a sum of a whole. And I'll start again in the same order. And same, I'll start with you. You know, you started new lessons way before COVID. So like it's really good to understand. As I talked about, you know, appreciation of digital. It'd be good to understand what the uptake or the adoption has been during this time in terms of new lesson. And the second question would be, what is your view of the future of education, especially in Nigeria, where, you know, the future of work, and also when you look at the current curriculum and how the relevance in the future, how does new lesson position itself of businesses like yours in Nigeria and Africa? You're mute.
We go. Entrepreneurs like myself and Rennie, Shola, we're sort of, and Obi, we're naturally sort of optimists. And so, you know, we look on better side. But I think, you know, to be frank, we've been really pleased with what we've seen with U lessons so far. It was started out with an assumption. You know, I like at this point in my life, I'm looking for industries that are very large, and education is an incredibly large one to tackle. And where, if you look at the alternative to the solutions that we are providing, it's just not possible. So, you know, one of my favorite CEOs in the world, I think for many people, is Jeff Bezos. And he talked about in the early days of Amazon, you know, they started with books. I think we all know they started with books. And at the time, the largest sort of flagship of Barnes and Nobles in New York, I think it was, could only carry about 100,000 titles of books. And that was the largest flagship. And at any one time in the United States, there were 3 million books in print. So it was literally impossible for a physical bookstore to carry all the books in print, and only Amazon could do that. And I think a similar thing is happening here. So we're facing massive challenges on the continent in the context of not only public sector investment in education, but private sector investment in education. And if you add both of those up, it is literally impossible for us to make the investments needed to cater to the demands of the young people that need educational services. It's simply impossible. There's no other way to do this except through digital services, if you do the math. And you know, many times we talk about how we're not investing enough government. If you look at our share of GDP going to education or government spending going to education, Nigeria is actually doing quite well. But it's just not possible to do it in the context of brick and mortar, build classrooms, and get the teachers out there. So the uptake has been very good in Nigeria. The only thing that has been better than the uptake in Nigeria, I have to tell you, has been the uptake in Ghana. Pound for pound, on a per capita basis, Ghanaians seem to be ordering much more from ULESSON than even Nigerians. And we're fulfilling out of all of these markets right now. So for me, I think the future of education is being, if there's one sector, I think, well, two sectors that are going through a massive change right now, and I have to rank them, I'd say it's education and healthcare. And you saw a similar sort of shift happen in 1930s, in the Great Depression of the 1930s in the United States. Education went through a massive shift. So you had sort of the Spanish flu, very similar to what we're going through now. It was a bit worse though. And then you had the Roaring 20s and then the Great Depression. And then education went through this massive shift because government had to get involved in it. Local governments were doing sort of unstandardized education at that point. So this is when classrooms were formed, standard curriculum was formed, classroom sizes expanded. So teacher-student ratios expanded during the Great Depression. I think we're going to see similar things happen now. Teacher-student ratios are going to expand again. There are already online services in China, for instance, where you have one super teacher. You know, there are these super teachers, you see them in China and South Korea, that teach classrooms of thousands of kids supported by teaching assistants. So I think we're going to see similar things happen now. I think the very nature of education is going to change. It's going to be disrupted. How do you know disruption? You're already seeing it. I've seen articles in Business Day. I've seen articles talking, you know, referring to Cambridge and Harvard. So it's not just Nigeria where, and it's not just secondary schools, also tertiary institutions where parents are saying, we will not pay these fees if all you're providing is educational services over Zoom. These are sort of the first sort of signs that disruption is coming. And at the same time, you have to empathize with the educational institutions because they have the overhead and the cost structure that if they were to reduce the price of their services, they can't bear to carry the overhead and the cost structure. So these are the first signs that disruption is coming. So I think digital is going to play a huge role going forward. The emphasis on classroom blocks, I think, will fade away. I think there will be new models for learning. I think parents will be involved much more. The calculus on parental involvement in learning will change. Whether that's a father or a mother, again, it doesn't necessarily, as it's historically been, have to be the woman, but I think you will see more family involvement in learning. I think a lot more learning will happen sort of at home. I think the present model of education is just not sustainable and will not get us to educate the literally hundreds of millions of young people that we have to educate on the continent. And we just hope to play a role in that. We tell ourselves in ULESSON that if we accomplish our mission, the notion of a child learning under a tree will not be such a bad thing going forward.
Thank you, Sam. I think, you know, I mean, like, I'm happy you spoke. Like, it appears that, you know, education is going the same way as financial services, less brick and mortar, and how you can actually provide these services in a very flexible manner. And thank you for that, Sam. Rennie, I'll ask you next. NOC, for those who have gone to NOC by Alara, African Fusion, very authentic and exciting to the palate and to the eyes as well. But you're still in business, but you started off physically, but now Knockout, you now have an online, you now have a delivery service. I'd like to ask you, why didn't you start that off initially? And secondly, it's interesting that you've actually developed your own delivery capabilities. I would have thought that you would have actually used existing infrastructure that was out there to deliver your food. What was the thought process behind that? So, like, it'd be nice to know why you didn't start Knockout when you started Knock, and then why you chose to build your own delivery system when there were delivery systems available.
Yeah, thank you, Uzoma, for the lovely things you said about Knock. The actual fact is that at the beginning, we didn't think we needed it. We didn't think we needed to do takeout. We are very much an experiential space. We want to inspire. We want people to see and to feel. So we're quite traditional in that way, in the sense that a lot of what we did was meant for people to come and explore our space. We created a very strong, impactful building that people could be inspired by. So we're very much a bricks and mortar, down on the ground, come and see what we can do. We have experiences where we have artists come in, we do music shows, we have, interesting things every weekend. We wanted a space to gather people together, to gather people who shared the same culture and felt that they wanted to see where they could be as Nigerians and Africans in the future. So in creating creating our menu, we had all that in mind, and we wanted people to feel the space, come into a space that's inspired by the past, feel how our, mothers and fathers lived, how they would set, beautiful plastic chairs in a beautiful green garden. It was very much part of our DNA that we wanted the feeling of people having a feeling of sentiment and enjoyment in our space. So the issue of takeout and delivery was never on the horizon. Even though we did do some minimal takeout, we have, if you had gone to Knock previously, you could do takeout. We didn't encourage it or advertise it because it wasn't particularly the best idea for the kind of food that we served. So it was available if you wanted it, but we didn't push it that much. So we're very much, very much coasting along very happily in our element. However, when COVID struck, another thing I would like you to know about Alara and Knock is that even though we're not a tech company, we feel very much that we are so able to change so often and try to be led a lot by what our customer wants and what we want for them, that we have so many units that we do all at once. We have events, we have fashion, we have design, and we have interior design, we have food, so we're very nimble. We tend to change as often as we need to. So when COVID struck, the first thing I thought was that, okay, what are we gonna do? People are not gonna wanna come and eat because they're not gonna feel safe. There's many, many different reasons. So I knew immediately that we had to change. But changing meant that we changed a lot of the DNA of who we are. So what is it about Knock, and how do we package that in a box? How do you have Knock food without a Knock experience? I didn't feel it was possible. And I felt that in order to do that, we needed to adjust and adapt. So we sort of thought, okay, what are the best sellers? What do people enjoy the most about Knock? They enjoy ambience. They enjoy the feeling that we give them when they come. What are the best sellers? So we thought, okay, let's create a menu around the best sellers with those dishes that are easy to carry. But also, let's remember that when you come into Knock, you have a feeling. And how do we convey that feeling? So we thought, okay, let's do a packaging that's impactful, that's contemporary, that makes you feel happy, makes you feel thought about, makes you feel that somebody cares about you and cares about the experience they're allowing you to have. So we thought, okay, let's design, let's produce, and let's change this whole thing, change it around. We were also very, very much conscious of the fact that we needed to keep our staff at work as much as possible. So, and we understood at the time that we couldn't have all our staff. So the whole 90 of them could not be there. So we chose who could be there based on who didn't have a family, age, who we needed. We kind of went through all that. We put them in a house together where they would be able to sort of commute to work together, and so that we could guarantee their safety and the safety of the food. And another thing that we also did, which was interesting, because you asked me now and you said, oh, why didn't you get a delivery service? I looked at my team and I said, who has a car? who can ride a bike? What are you doing? And we just repurposed everyone. And I'm like, okay, you can do it because we have a DNA. We work very hard to train our staff. We have a very sort of empowering concept, which is that, yes, we are in Africa. Yes, we're in Nigeria. Yes, we don't necessarily have the best hospitality education, but we do our best. We try to give you a traditional African welcome. We try to do what we can. And I try to get my staff to understand and believe that you are hosts in this space. It means that you are the winners and you are teaching people the way we want them to live. So there's a confidence boosting, sort of that whole thing that we've spent a lot of time with our staff for. And I knew that we couldn't translate that to somebody who was riding a bike and just delivering food in a bag. And I felt very strongly also that there was an attachment that a lot of the customers that we have had to this whole thing, and even to some of the people already in NOG. So it was important that we continued that, and we didn't have a break in that. And thankfully, because we worked so fast, we were able to do things that a lot of other restaurants probably would have taken longer to do. So that was basically where we sort of managed to pivot quite fast, because we tried to be nimble and agile.
Right. Thank you, Renee. I think, there were some insightful remarks that you made there. That whole training and retraining your staff. But I think more importantly, in that training, I think you would infuse the DNA of your business, so they would actually carry along that brand through to the last mile than just giving it to a delivery agency. So that's very insightful, and thank you for that. My next question, of course, goes to Vivian. Vivian, not only trust is you are involved in the health business, which is life, which is and so a lot of trust is required there. And now, where people can't, now we have a situation where people can't go to the hospital or to doctors or to clinics. How do you think, based on your experience working with hospitals, clinics, doctors, can the health companies grow during this period and still maintain that trust and deliver on the objectives that they have to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's all about building a brand and being very clear on what you're trying to achieve. So we knew that our mission, that's built into the ethos of our company, is that quality medication is a fundamental human right. And so everything that we're doing is around this idea of quality medication and how we can improve, whether it's our processes, our team, the experience of working with MedZef, how we can make sure that that desire to have quality medication dispensed is infused throughout everything that we do. And we've been doing this since 2017. So competitors that come in that want to copy us, if they don't have that built in, they're not on our level. But that being said, it was also about building a brand, right? And I knew that from the very beginning. Our biggest competitor is the open drug market. I don't know if you guys have been there. One of my favorite stories in Nigeria is being arrested and put on trial in the open drug market. Why? Because I needed to go there. I needed to feel and understand exactly what it was that I was up against. And I need to build the company knowing that that is exactly what we're combating, and build the brand around what we wanted to do to differentiate ourselves from the open drug market, which is the easiest place to get your medications before COVID, right? So now that we've been working on our brand for 3 years, we knew that by building it up to a certain point where we become the trusted brand, that we could use that to then scale into other countries and then get onto our next initiatives further down the line. So that was really important. So I would say for people who are thinking about even starting a business now, maybe it's about what's your brand and how are you really getting that message out across to your stakeholders. Because throughout COVID-19, we were able to actually be pulled into other cities in Abuja, Port Harcourt, because of our brand and because we've used technology from the very beginning. and people knew that, and so they wanted to work with us, without ever having met us before. So this is the time in our history where we can kind of, break down, some of the traditional ways of working in Nigeria and actually build trust online virtually based off of building up your brand. And also, we solve problems, and we've always solved problems. And I think that within this COVID-19 context, you really should just take the time to empathize, truly empathize with what your customers are going through. So when I was walking through the market, walking through that market is me trying to empathize and put myself in the shoes, because then I can build something that actually solves a real problem. And I think, you've got this kind of theme about, getting rid of the noise and the clutter. And right now everyone's saying, yeah, it's COVID-19 disruption, blah, blah, blah. Like, just take that aside and focus on what is it that you do well? What is it that you want to do? What are you passionate about? And how can what you're passionate about actually solve the real problem? Not the problem that everyone says is the problem, but the real way that people have to go around and over issues, be able to get things done, especially in a COVID-19 world, right? That's how you build trust. That's how you build a company that can also scale through these types of times. And that's what MedZaf has done.
Thank you, Vivian. And I think there's a theme coming through from what you've said, and also Rennie, which is, the brand is very, very important. You have to invest in your brand, and your customers have to actually understand exactly what you stand for, because and trust is very important. But if you're eating and if you're like taking a medication, you actually need to trust the source. And so that's something to take away from that. Shola, over to you. I mean, you've been around for 4 years and more now, and successfully grown a payment platform. And I'm sure a lot of there will be a rearrangement of people who are coming on the platform, and also people who are dropping off because their business model is going through a hard time in this period. So I mean, if you can give us some insights into that, that would be great. Secondly, I mean, apparently about 39 million small businesses are registered in Nigeria. And I don't think many of them have heard, and most of them are actually under the radar, using cash and not going through payment platform. How is Paystar going to leverage on that? You said that your business has grown 4 times since you started. I think it can grow by something like, sorry, not your business, sorry, your the payment going through the platform. I think there's room for more, but how can Paystar actually leverage the current situation and help small businesses become digital in their payment platforms?
All right. Thank you so much, Uzoma. I guess the first one is you asked for insights. I don't have a lot of insights, I guess, but I think the first one is that we're seeing a lot more people sign up. So when we look at our weekly numbers, it's now 4 times. I don't know why everything is 4. To reclarify what you said, the first point I talked about scaling, I said we were doing 4 times what Nigeria as a country was doing. That's what we're doing now. So not like, so that's the first one. Now, so we're seeing 4 times more signups weekly now. And I guess that's a good thing. We talked about industries. Of course, unfortunately, the travel industry is down. The gaming industry is also down probably by about 40% just because of the Premier League games and all are down, so that's affected. E-commerce is up, rightly so. Utilities is really up because I guess you can't go to NEPA office to buy electricity again, So I guess that's what we're seeing from like a sector, from the sector breakdown. From the question about how we're like supporting small businesses and helping people scale, we've done a few things in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I think the first thing is just partnering with digital agencies. I think one of the first things we've heard from people is like, they don't even know who to talk to, especially for those that have like complex requirements. And so we partnered with, I think, about 7 or 8 digital agencies. And then we had a forum where we were going to sponsor about 40 businesses and just help them, connect them to those people, and just help them get online as fast as they can. I think that's one of the things we've done. We've also been doing a lot of writing. We recently wrote a 6,000 word blog post about how restaurant businesses are moving online. So we looked at the restaurant businesses in different countries, and just did a lot to just like put everything down in one place to make that work. Also, I think this is where a lot of our work in the past is coming to play. Things like disputes, things like refunds. This is the time where the financial infrastructure has to work. If you have to refund a merchant, if you have to refund a customer, you can say the person can't go to their bank every time to check if the refund is there and all that. So I think just getting our infrastructure to work as promised is something we've spent a lot of time doing. Having said all that, I think we're also very careful to just realize that, guys, this is a pandemic. We want to stay alive. And so we've been spending a lot of time just like not putting a lot of pressure on our people. I guess personally, I told our people, you know what, you just have to prioritize yourself and your families. So I think the Paystack vision and the Paystack mission is a long-term game. It's not, and thankfully we've spent the last 4 years building this infrastructure. And so we're not really thinking about it from, in the next 2 weeks, this is what we need to do. It's more long-term, and yeah, we'll just continue to do what we're doing. So thanks.
Thanks, and of course, the last mile and the last question, specific question. We've heard from Rennie and talk about logistics. We've also heard from Vivian as well, and trust is very, very key. I mean, you started your business way before COVID, and you saw gaps in the market, and I think Uber 360 had played a big role in enhancing productivity and efficiency. So how do you see your business going into the future, knowing that logistics is going to be very, very key as commerce is redefined in this space? Because my view is that people are not going to be doing what they were doing in the past, and how are you going to position yourself to actually take into consideration those concerns people have with trust, the way you deliver, the way cards, for example, security documents are delivered are completely different from the way health or food is delivered. And so what role is going to play in that, or logistics? And you also give an insight in your opening remarks of that.
Yeah, I think the first thing we realized was that this sector is very huge. It's big. It's been in existence for a long time. So it's very difficult for a startup to think that you can come in and within a few years, you can solve all the problems there. And that's also something for the audience to realize, right? There are a lot of opportunities in the continent and the most frontier markets. So you have to be deliberate about the problems you tackle. So for us, we decided that we are not going to go into the last mile delivery business at this time, that we want to solve at least from the port to the factories to the distributors. And then we're going a step lower now, from the major distributors to the lower retail outlets, supermarkets, and some of those. And the key thing is that the main cost of supply chain lie along those areas, right? So, and it requires a lot of scale. It's not really something you can do if you're not big. So some of the things we've started thinking about is, in this our approach to getting to the distribution, think of it, warehousing and distribution, right? How can we make it easy for different companies that want to go digital to actually achieve that? Because you can't actually go digital if those infrastructure don't exist. It just be dreams that can't come true, right? Somebody needs to have those infrastructure, whether it's for dry goods or for refrigerated goods, right? So, and we've been making progress on that. So you can think of Kobo as servicing the large companies, the medium scale enterprises. We're about to now move to the SMEs to a degree. And then after that, we can do the e-commerce. The e-commerce is not big at this time. Most of the things are still moving through the informal channels. And the infrastructure we're setting up is to allow those. Then another thing that is also key is really getting adequate data, and because our business kind of covers trade and commerce, right? Literally, most things going on in the economy. And you don't have real sources of data, right? So what we've been doing in the past 2.5 years is to actually be able to build a data bank of trade and commerce and what is going on in the economy. And we're beginning to understand it better. We're beginning to understand where things are going, what is really happening in this economy, potentially more than most government people will know, actually, right? And it's allowing us to be able to know where to focus on, right, and how to solve these problems, right? And the good thing also is from what we're seeing, whether it's in the payment or even the pharmaceutical space or food, we're beginning to see that there is potential to actually build something that will service a lot of people. And some of these different infrastructure, whether it's the payment infrastructure, are aiding our businesses as well, right? Before, you would have had issues with collection of money and payments to drivers, right? A lot of these things would have been manual. If you now have like more than 30,000 drivers, right, trips, more than 500 trips every day originating, trailer trips, how will you actually be able to make payments, right? That's why we plugged in with Paystack, Shola, and they've made that happen, right? And this thing makes our life easy as well, so that we can focus on other important things, right? And that's what is exciting me in the ecosystem. We're beginning to see an ecosystem emerge, right? It started with SIM, of course, SIM and Co originating this, and Shola them have also taken it to next level. And we're seeing Vivian and newcomers like us trying to also push it to the next level. So it's an ecosystem. I think is a decade effort, right? And by next few years, most things will start working. When we are working in Kenya or in Egypt, things actually work, right? Things actually are a little bit easier there. You are not solving for everything. But in Nigeria, you're solving for literally everything, right? And it makes it difficult for businesses to scale, right? So I'm excited, and the key thing is you really have to understand the problem. It's not just what you think. You need to gather data and understand it. You need to be focused there's too much opportunity around this ecosystem. So you really have to be focused on what you want to do and just get good at one thing. As Shola mentioned, it's a long game, right? It's not a 4-year game. It's a long game. Companies last for decades.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Obi. You know, my last question was going to be a general question to everyone on the advice they would give to small businesses. But in your remarks, you've actually given a lot of advice. We've had advice from trust, impatience, long game, and we've had one on training and retraining your staff as well. And so I think it would be, since we're mobile and agile and flexible, I think we should just leave that last round and go to questions and answers, because I think Jessica has compiled a lot of questions from the audience, and very interesting questions, and it would be good for us to answer, take a stab at them. So I'll hand over now to Jessica and to go through the questions and answers, and I will now join the panelists in answering questions.
Yes, if anyone's got any difficult questions for Uzoma, please share now in the Q&A section. Thank you very much, everyone. There were some really interesting insights there. And so let's just dive a little bit deeper and go into some questions here. Okay, so this one may be for you, Vivian, actually. Many Nigerians still don't trust digital experiences due to security and fraud concerns. Do you think COVID will change this? If yes, how? If no, why? And actually, I think it would be interesting to have another layer on that, because, you know, obviously you work in the most important, like, trust sector, which is health. Like, trusting people with your health is like the most important thing. So how do you feel that digital is going to help, or I guess hinder?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, you know, you should look at technology as it's assisting you. It's tech enabled, right? It doesn't, completely take away everything else that you need to do in your business. So for the way I would answer that is, by creating partnerships. For example, we looked at the healthcare ecosystem and said, how can we use the data that we collect on the flow of medications through our platform? How can we use that to help some of the problems that other healthcare stakeholders who are bigger than us and have a larger brand than we do, how can we help them and create alliances with them that will just reinforce why people need to work with MedZaf? So whether that's, the large, the Pfizers, the Sanofis, or if it's the local manufacturers or insurance companies or NGOs. So that's one way that you're still a tech platform, right? But you're now leveraging partnerships to actually, reinforce that brand awareness and reinforce this trust that you need to kind of build to be able to do that. So that's just one way, but it is not, I definitely right now wouldn't just go onto a random website and buy something that I have no clue where it's coming from. So you want to be thinking about how you can get more information, how you can help, maybe write some think pieces or just kind of get, the point of what your company is trying to really achieve out there so that people can cross-check and then decide whether or not they will trust to use your platform. But that being said, the platform itself just makes it that much easier, that much faster, that much more efficient and transparent. So if you're thinking about an industry like mine, the fact there is no transparency, that is the problem. That is why, fake and substandard medications easily flow, and now fake masks and fake gloves and all these types of things, that's how they get through. So we're flipping it by using technology to create transparency, which then is building even more trust that doesn't exist currently. So you just need to figure out how you're actually using the technology to achieve your goals.
And also, I wanted to add to what Vivian mentioned, right? One of the interesting things to us is that this COVID have actually created an opportunity to push digital, right? And in spaces where we are dealing with large companies like Unilever's, right? Most of them really are very difficult to change. So we, for example, in our business, we have proof of delivery, right? Which is a paper process. And this has been there since ages, right? But we've seen that more than 58% of the customers have actually adopted digital waybill system, right? Which we actually had in our platform, but they just don't want to adopt it because the auditors still need physical papers, right? And these have actually reduced 10 days from our cash to cash cycle. That is about 0.7% on every money that we pay to drivers, right? That we are now able to save and make. And if you're doing tens of millions of dollars in a month, that actually can add up. So I think also this is a moment for startups, in my view. The only thing we are focused on achieving during this season is to get customers to adopt digital waybill, because there is no other time to do that than this period. So I think also every kind of company should see, what does this COVID that will last maybe for the next 3 months again, what does it allow me to get that normally I can't be able to achieve? So it's also important. It's going to get away. It's like a rain. It will rain and then there will be sunshine again, right? But I think it's an interesting 2-3 months to force down digital on your customers' potential.
I also want to say this is a great time. I mean, Nigerians love to meet in person. This is a great time to get the decision makers on Zoom so that you can actually close deals. So I think that kind of goes along with what you're saying, Obi, which is just that this is the time to just push it all the way and get what you can so that you can start changing behaviors for good.
Thank you, Vivian. And Obi, I think, Vivian, you've opened yourself up to like probably a lot of emails about doing deals after this webinar now. So that's good. And Obi, actually, you had a really interesting point there about you already had a lot of the digital functions within the company, but they weren't necessarily being used already, but kind of COVID and what's happened has actually like accelerated that. So a question here is from someone, And I think probably, Rennie, you're the best person to answer this. And you touched on it in your introduction as well. Is it possible for traditional companies to switch to digital during COVID, which I think you kind of proved that, yes, it is, although I think there's probably space to it, like increase that. Is it too late? And should there have been a plan in place pre-COVID?
No, there didn't need to be a plan pre-COVID. Even though we did, sort of have something of sort of a footprint that we thought that we would go through. Everything was completely shelved. The manner in which we changed was completely shelved. We had ideas of starting whole restaurants in different areas. That was completely like a different way to go. But when it's just about agility and being able to use everything around you, with the most important issues being, what does my customer need? How can I make this happen? And how can tech assist me? In the end, I'm not, digital does not mean you must be tech driven in every single thing. It just means you can respond quickly and you can solve these kind of problems. For us, we used everything around us. We didn't have to do anything particularly new. We didn't have to spend extra money apart from on packaging. We used people that we had before. We literally just followed a model of, okay, going from bricks and mortar to digital and doing it in the cheapest way. In the end, it's about thinking and finding a way to make something happen quickly. And having your customer as number one. What does my customer want and what can I do to make it happen?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Uzoma, do you have anything? Because I know you've always been really focused on customer-centric, building the product around the customer, continuously talking to the customer, your time at Diamond Bank, and obviously whilst growing and building Sparkle as well. Like, what's your top tips for those?
Well, I think all businesses are platforms, and like you have to really understand, all the businesses are platforms and operating models are changing. I think in today's world, you can't just do everything alone because you have to understand. And I think my only advice I would give, like you have to understand your customer, but my only advice I would give is that you have to look at exactly what your customers are doing with your products or your services. And as somebody, a wise man once said, people don't buy drilling machines, they actually buy holes. So what are they doing? So like, and now today, in a world where people are thinking of paying as they go or scaling as they go, they don't want to buy assets, they want to use stuff. And in that means that you have to start collaborating with different businesses or people that you would have not, people that you would have competed with. You have to see how you can actually collaborate and share. And I think we're now moving into a world where people are collaborating and sharing. And at Sparkle, we're looking at how we can actually help customers. And to do that, we have to get partners who are digital, who think they can use, we can use digital to help people get on with their day. And so that means collaborating, understanding our customers, and also sharing, and knowing that people are going to be looking for value these days. I think Sim mentioned the fact that people are going to be asking, what am I paying school fees for? Because yes, so yes, as a business, you understand that yes, you have your own overheads, but as a parent, my objective is I want my children to go to school. How you deliver that, it's your own operating issue. But so and the school or the organization that can deliver what parents want at a valuable cost are the ones who are going to win. And sometimes it doesn't mean doing it by yourself, but actually partnering.
Thank you very much for that, Uzoma. There's a question here that I think a few people could answer. I think maybe Sim or Obi or Vivian and Shola actually as well. Do you think businesses can still attract investments at this time? Like, what's the investment market out there saying? And let me just add, I know we're short on time. Let me add a couple of other questions there because I think it factors into the investment kind of discussion. How can companies stand out from the crowd? So obviously, how can they stand out in terms of from their customers, but maybe also in terms of attracting and speaking to investors as well? Sim, let's start with you, please, if that's okay. But we'd love some input as well from Shola and Obi.
Sure. Yeah. So I've talked to a number of investors, and thankfully, I have a bunch of these relationships. But everybody kind of has their own opinion, and sort of the classic kind of fundraising path is your Series Seed, and then your Series A, and your Series B, and your ease of sort of finding investment right now, from what I understand, really depends on where you are on the journey. what we're seeing is that it's probably easier for folks that are sort of, that have already raised a Series Seed, that are looking for a Series A. So a seed is you've proved the product market fit and you're basically looking to kind of scale up. You may sort of still be, working on the product at the edges. That's easier to fund up than basically a super early startup. But that's not to say that, anything is impossible. I think the other dimension to consider is if you already have established investments. I mean, I think there's only so much due diligence and relationships and all of those softer sides of investment, the investor-founder dance that can happen online over Zoom. So to the degree that you already have established relationships and folks have visited your offices and you know people, then that makes it easier to kind of kick off an investment round and close it successfully. Than if you were just meeting people sort of greenfield, blank sheet of paper, then it's a bit more difficult. But overall, I think and this sort of is a segue to your next question, I think overall it's become more difficult. We have to admit that to ourselves. And the world was already changing before this situation. I think it's even changed more. I think profitability and good unit economics are more important now. Growth at all costs is going away. Investors are looking for, it's not so much that investors are shying away from, telling a founder, look, invest if it will give you a return in future, but this sort of baseless chasing after growth at all costs, I think that world is gone. I think we're looking at unit economics now. You're looking for really, really diversified businesses. I think businesses that are exposed to any single, especially in our context of Africa, any single economy should look for diversification to the degree that the business model allows. This was actually a great piece of advice that I got in a conversation with Obi. I kind of sort of already knew it academically, but understanding his own business and how he's thinking about it just a few weeks ago really crystallized it for me. Because we just don't know where the Naira is going to end up, for instance. So I think these are some of the things that investors are looking at. So it's not impossible, it's gotten more difficult, and we'll see how it plays out. For us, we're really sort of, as a business, really focusing on what's essential. We're still innovating. We're going to be rolling out some very exciting features over the next year. ULESN is going to junior secondary school. We're going to be rolling out for Windows. And then I'm really excited about the fact that you're not going to only be able to learn from sort of pre-recorded lessons, but we're going to find a way to get those super teachers to you. So somebody who's learned at Imperial College or Cambridge or Harvard or Stanford can effectively teach your child secondary school physics. So we're still going to be working on some of these things over the next year, but as one of my investors put it, survival is sort of top of mind right now. So we got to make it deep into next year.
Thank you, Sim. I think that was like a masterclass in how we approach like the investor community, speaking to them. Obi, Vivian, Shola, anything to add? Vivian, yes?
I'd like to add, because I'm currently raising. And so I think the interesting thing that happened because of COVID-19 is that it really just by force stretched our minds to how quickly we could do certain things and how quickly we could get to certain goals faster than we ever thought that we could. So when we started before COVID-19, we had, our plan, and it was based off of, what we thought we could do, with the resources that we were looking for and historically what's happened. But now that COVID-19 has allowed us to get across the country without even opening up another office in another city, selling to patients, selling to the average person, corporations. I mean, we just expanded so much that it's also now changed the way that we're looking at the types of investors that we need and actually how we're gonna, the type of partners that we need. So yeah, it could potentially be harder, but I'm not really thinking about it like that. I'm thinking of it like, okay, it's just pushed us and expanded us. So the smart person is going to jump in on what we're trying to do and help us get to the next level. So I'm a bit optimistic about it. I don't see challenges that way, but I would say if you're looking to raise, you should be looking at ways that you can also kind of expand with less, right? You know, and be more efficient so that it looks even better of an opportunity for those investors who are interested.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Shola, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think they've said it all. But I think one of the very first things I learned when I was becoming like a venture funded founder was that the work of a founder is to build a good business. And then the work of an investor is to look for good businesses and invest in them. So I think it is very important for founders to continue to stay on their lane and understand what they're doing and just like focus on building your business. Like there are good investors out there that recognize good businesses, that recognize progress, you know? So I think the way to do it is, and like Sim has said, like everyone has said, like, we don't know, you don't have control over what the investors will do. You know, the only thing you have control over is your business. So just stay focused, understand what progress means for you, make your own progress. If you are good, find a way to tell your story, and just like, hopefully the good investors will find you and support you. Yeah.
Thank you, Shola.
I was going to quickly add, I think it's also not just looking for, you know, investors outside, but inside. I think as a country, as many countries, people are going to be looking inwards now. And when you even look at, you know, my feeling is that even when we found a vaccine, traveling is going to be a bigger nightmare than it was. It was a nightmare when there were, you know, with terrorism now, with this now, it's going to take 3-4 hours. So first of all, local tourism, what can you do? How can you partner with existing businesses in existing businesses? And it also means that, you know, people are going to be looking at health consciousness. How clean is the place? What's the brand like? What's the trust level like? But people are going to be looking. Look, if I could get away somewhere in Lagos for 3 days instead of going to the airport, spending 5 hours, and then risking being quarantined somewhere when I get there, and risking being quarantined when I come back, then, you know, I would choose to do it locally. So I think it's looking inwards locally as well for local investors. Like, you're going to find people who need to put their money somewhere apart from the dollar, and think, how can I invest it locally? And so that local market has to develop in terms of investment, but also local businesses have a chance to, as Rennie had said, reinvent themselves and reinvent their purposes as well, or else they will have problems. So it's just, resilience is very, very key at this point.
That's a really good point. So I'm conscious that we're going over time a bit, but apologies, but I think let's keep going for another like 10 minutes or so, because the questions are amazing. And for anyone who's put forward a question, we'll try and get through them. Shola and Sim, people seem to be asking you some very specific questions. So if you can jump on and answer them directly, I'm sure that would be very much appreciated. I think Obi, there was a logistics one as well. So if you can have a look through. But one question that really caught my eye here. Digital is very nice and the key way to go. But my question is, how do we manage the less literate on digital world? For instance, the aged ones who don't have enablers for digital processes like smartphones and laptops. And Obi, actually, it might be interesting to see, like, how have you found kind of using digital and tech with, say, truck drivers who maybe were used to feature phones rather than smartphones, and kind of bringing technology to their like day-to-day like workplaces?
Yeah, it was difficult, very difficult, and it's still. I think the key thing is technology is not something on its own. It's the way of making more efficient, right? As Rainy mentioned, right? It doesn't really need to be about coding, right? So to us, when we're thinking of technology for drivers, we say, okay, how do we make their life efficient, right? What is it that they really need? So in our driver app, we tied payments to it. So we built an app before that was interesting, that gives you job and all these things, but it wasn't moving adoption in Nigeria. In Kenya, you had 92% adoption, but it wasn't moving the needle in Nigeria. But we now drivers to request their payment through the app. And it was only 2 clicks to request payment and accept the trip, request payment, and go on the journey. So immediately we tied payments, right, to the driver app. It was adopted. They learned it. And I taught my mom yesterday, I bought her a smartphone. She didn't want smartphone, but because she now makes some salaries from me and she doesn't want me to know who she's sending money to, right? She had to want a smartphone, and she want to learn how to transfer money so that I don't know who she's giving money to, right? So, and yesterday I spent time teaching her, and she learned how to use the phone app. So I really think it's about finding what is that thing that people really want. They will learn it. They will learn it. It's not special, but don't give them things you want to give them. It's not about, oh, I want to see them moving on the app like that's not going to interest them. So it's already be there in the background. What interests them is how do they get their money? How do they find load from point B to A? They're not interested in the A to B. It's the B to A that is interesting to them, right? So that is really how we prepare the app. Of course, you have to add multiple languages because we're just a diverse continent, right? But those things are the line which I think you have to move in order to get technology adoption.
Also, I wanted to add that I think a lot of people don't talk about the fact that you really can't have, well, a business like mine, you really can't make technology work for you unless you have the right processes in place that are reinforced by all of your, by your entire team. So for us, we had to, especially now that majority of our team is remote, except for our operations and our drivers, because we also have drivers as well. Those are the only ones that are working in our office at the moment. So we had to do an entire revamp of our processes and just make sure that it could handle most of us being remote. So you should just also focus on that piece too. And if you have really good processes in place that are tech enabled, then it doesn't necessarily mean that the end user or or one of the people in the chain necessarily has to be so well versed in technology. If you have the right processes in place. When we first started MedZap, we had to take the laptops to Ogun State or the far corners of Lagos State and teach people how to use Excel, teach people how to log on to the laptop, teach them how to go send an email. Like we had to do all of those different things. But by teaching, but then also putting the right processes in place, we're able to get adoption. So I think you should also think about that too.
Okay, that's an interesting point. And that leads us on to another question. I'm going to try and get through as many questions as possible. So in terms of actually privacy, so we're talking about adoption of digital, et cetera, and probably more people working from home, working from laptops, et cetera, like you mentioned as well, Vivian. We have a question here. How do we tackle privacy issues relating to company information? And there's actually an interesting one that Shola, maybe you can help with. Are you increasing investment in cybersecurity to reflect the increasing shift to online as well? Oh, I think Shola's internet's dropped. Anyone else? There we go, Shola.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Is my internet back?
Yeah, your internet is back.
Oh, okay. yeah, cool. So I had the question about cybersecurity. I think and for us, just being in the payments industry, a lot of our work has been just figuring out how to build a secure platform and just meet all the standards. Yes, we're really spending a lot of time on security, on tools, even for employees, even for like our processes and everything. So yes, I think we're doing that. It is very important to know that like when you think of what are like the 4 big things that what are the 4 barriers to payments is usually infrastructure, literacy, trust, and security. So security has always been a barrier. And so even with this COVID situation, like we know that, and we've been like spending a lot of time trying to figure that out and just continue to make it work. Yeah.
I was going to add, Jessica, yeah, there's a trust, there's security, there's cybersecurity, but then most cybersecurity starts from collusion. So in the end, Vivian said the process before you go digital, make sure you have the right people, make sure you have the right people. But if you don't have the right people in terms of trust, in terms of understanding the business, going digital, the digital will actually amplify any problem that you have. And so going digital is also a way of enhancing trust, enhancing discipline, and also scaling as well. But you have to do it with the right people, with the right structure, and the right process.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, I think last question, and it's out to everyone. Are we going to see a partnership among you guys in the nearest future? Let's start with Rennie. Rennie, how can you work with any of these fine entrepreneurs and innovators?
I actually probably need to work with all of them, one way or another. We have payments that, of course, I mean, and Shola and I have tried to work together before. It hasn't worked out. We should find a way to make it work. I was thinking in particular about Sim, actually, about what he does with education, which I think is really impressive. Well done, Sim. I also chatting with Zoma before about how I think education is such a big thing in Nigeria. But it so expands it to all sorts of other areas. For us in particular, it expands the fashion and the fact that fashion needs a really good education base. What has happened with fashion is that now people are starting to know a lot about African fashion, but there's no base, there's no, there's no real basis for it because we don't have very good educational systems. And I know that what you're doing is on a different level, but it's something to think about, that there's so many different areas that need sort of education in a very short, quick and easy way going forward, because we can't catch up with the rest of the world if we go through the traditional channels. So that's something that I'd like you to think about going forward, because I think it's super important. We want to do e-commerce for us, and of course we need a lot of support from banks, Uzoma for one, with Sparkle. There's so much that we want to do, that we have to do now, that we were not thinking of before. In terms of logistics, whether we want to partner with a logistics company for delivering of food, whether we can find something of a synergy is important. So there's different, I mean, everybody here has something to offer in the future of Alara, and not for me personally. And I think that this panel has been tremendous in that it's opened my eyes to a lot of things that I possibly didn't know before and was thinking about that I didn't have solutions for. So it's very interesting, and it's nice to meet Vivian. I never knew her, and I never knew what she did previously. Now with COVID-19 is super important. So yes, I think we will all be meeting soon, hopefully. Somebody fell out.
Anyone else want to enter the deal room here before we finish? We're all business owners and entrepreneurs. We're here to do deals. So
we signed up with Paystack actually when we started selling directly to the patients. So we haven't yet fully, I think we're still in the integration phase, but we realized that, you know, now we don't have to wait for various stakeholders to sign checks and deposit checks into our bank account, because we're not just working with hospitals and pharmacies. We can now, you know, collect transfers, which has been great. And it would be even better if people could just use their credit cards. So we're now there. I think Kobo 360, we've always been looking to partner. But I think the biggest thing that I hope comes out of this entire challenge is that Africans, startups working in Africa, we have a lack of trust anyways with each other. And I think that you can't go far. You can't create these big, companies that are really going to scale unless you do have the right partnerships in place. So I hope that, this different mindset allows people to realize that it is okay. No one's going to steal if they steal your idea, they're not going to steal your execution of that idea. And it is okay to partner and to grow bigger. And I think that's what's going to happen out of this whole thing, I hope.
Yeah. Just to round up also, I think very clearly there's a generation of builders in the continent now. I'm looking at all the panelists, I'm looking at the attendees lists, and I can see a lot of people doing amazing things. And I'm just proud to be part of this generation. So thank you so much, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ola. So I think that's going to draw a close to the webinar. To all the people who've answered brilliant questions, thank you. We'll try and get through them in one way or another. Thank you to our panelists as well. Sorry we've gone over, but it was just really good quality content, right? And I am going to hand over to Uzoma now just for final thoughts, etc. So over to you, Uzoma.
Thank you very much. I think we've gone over time, so I'll be very short. I'd like to thank the panelists. I'd like to thank Jessica Wimbart for being part of this and making it work. It's been very exciting. I think the future is definitely digital, and I think collaboration collaboration is very, very key. And, at Sparkle, we say that, we're not about financial services, we're actually about customer centric. What do you want to do today? And to help people do that, people want to live, really. You have to partner, you have to collaborate. And I think education is going to be a big part. Education, not just like science, math, and English, but education in terms of, we educating the whole nation in terms of how they live and how they're going to be resilient to get back. So U-Lesson is a platform, and I think people which will allow us to actually use to change changes. Trust key, Vivian. The more we use to build trust, and we talk about trust, the more people are comfortable with digital adoption, which is very, very key. Payment is like the blood in a human body. Without payment, you can't. Without blood, you can't live. And without payments, you can't facilitate commerce. And the last mile delivery is very, very key. So it just reinforces the need for people to collaborate and people to agree on common standards. And if common standard is that we're going to try and be digital, and when for digital, we're going to ensure that these are the trust levels we're going to build in, so that the more people that are included, and this is the new world of inclusion, right? The more that we can all scale and we can provide for a better society. And so, and that's the way I'm going to end it. And thank you all for really an engaging, interactive, and insightful session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I used to broadcast, is it off? Mike.